big deal. You know, that was really an accomplishment because he's trying.
In the previous video, Dr. Tomlinson presented examples of how differentiation can be used in classrooms. In this video, she will continue with further examples, including one that involves a teacher who is having trouble finding the time to include differentiation in her already busy schedule. And now, Dr. Tomlinson.
Here's another example of a teacher who's trying to reach out to kids at where they are as individuals. And this actually was an interesting example to me. It's a young teacher who actually was a first-year teacher in a district where most of her colleagues were fairly senior teachers, had been around for a while, were very skilled and competent, and she was watching them, after several years of working with differentiation, do quite a bit in the class. And she was kind of like your colleague here yesterday who sort of said, how in the heck do you do this? I'm already working 15 hours a day, where else do I add it? And she kept saying to me, I just don't think I can do this. I'm here at 7 in the morning and I'm still here at 7 at night, and I just don't know how I can do anything else. And I kept saying to her, Annie, maybe you can't your first year. You know, that's really a lot. I think most of us just survived the first year with mental health as a pretty good first year. So listen and see what kinds of things you'd like to plan for over the summer and try a few things next year, but just don't kill yourself this year. She'd come back the next meeting, same thing. I'm up at 7, I'm here at 7 in the morning, I'm here at 7 at night, and I don't have a life and I don't know how I can do this. And I'd say, Annie, don't. Do what you can do, you know, to learn. Keep going to make the year go as well for you and your students as possible. Just don't kill yourself. Finally, we'd had the conversation a half a dozen times. Finally, I said, okay, I tell you what, if it all seems so overwhelming, pick one subject to do a little differentiation in. Don't try to differentiate all the subjects all day long. Pick one. Pick reading because it's the easiest for you. Or pick math because it's where more students need your help. But just choose one little area. And she came back the next time, same thing, I'm here at 7 in the morning, I'm here at 7, blah, blah, blah. And I said, you know, Annie, I don't know what else to say to you. I've tried everything I know. And she said, well, here's what my trouble is. I can't just differentiate in math because although that helps the few students who really need me, there really are some kids who need me to differentiate in technology. That's what they love. And if I don't do that for them, it didn't help that I differentiated in math. And I said, you know what, you're a way better first-year teacher than I was. I wouldn't have figured that out for 10 years, what you've just said. So you've already had a really great insight. But you can't do everything for everybody in the beginning because you kill yourself doing it. So you sort of have to just say, I wish I could take 5 steps, but I'm going to try to be pleased with one. Happened to be in her school a while after that and had a few minutes to spare and walked by her class and stuck my head in to see her, and I couldn't find her. But all of a sudden, it struck me that the class was really kind of wonderful. There were some kids sitting at tables. Everybody was working, sometimes together, sometimes by themselves. There were kids sitting on the floor. There were kids at the computer. Some kids stretched out doing things. And I finally saw her in the back of the room on the floor with a couple of kids talking to them. And I watched the class for a few minutes, and then I left. Everybody still functioning beautifully. And I saw her that afternoon, and she said, what'd you think? And I said, I'm not quite sure what you mean. And she said, what'd you think about my class? And I said, I thought it was amazing, Annie. I couldn't have done that after several years of teaching. Everybody was productive. Everybody was on task. Everybody seemed to know exactly what they were doing. It looked wonderful to me. And she said, that's not what I mean. What I mean is, what'd you think of my solution? And I said, I don't guess I know what your solution was. And this is what she had created. This was her response to her need. This is not an everybody should do this. It was what she came up with. Her students came to school on buses in the morning, staggered in. So some kids got there, 45 minutes before other kids because the buses arrive at different times. And when the kids got to school, they went to their classroom. And the teacher had to start them on something. And lots of times the teachers let them read or work with centers that were there. But what Annie did was create a personal agenda for each student. And they had a personal agenda folder in a little box by the door that they knew the location of. And the procedure became that when you came into school, you picked up your personal agenda folder and you went to your table and you took out your planning sheet. And on that planning sheet, you reviewed what you did yesterday and you wrote your goal for today. Here's what I want to accomplish, and here's how I'll know if I accomplished it. You left that on your desk so the teacher could come by and see what you were planning to work on. And then you worked on whatever task on your agenda that you wanted to work on or that was left to work on. What she has done here is to put on 5 or 6 tasks in this particular instance, and every one of them relates to something that's going on later in the day. For example, everybody has to complete 2 spelling cycles. Every kid is working on spelling at their level, but they have to work on 2 spelling cycles. Spelling's a part of their day. In science, they're working on volcanoes, and they all are producing an article on volcanoes for a science newsletter that they're going to share with other grades. So every kid has something they have to do toward that science newsletter, newspaper that's coming out. But the tasks that they're working on differ based on their interests and their writing skills and how slick they are with volcanoes and what materials they should be using and that kind of thing. Everybody has a math task to do. And for some of the kids, the math task is just practicing what they're working on in class. But sometimes the math task might be going back to work on some vocabulary they're missing from a previous unit or some skills they didn't have from last year. Occasionally the math task is much more advanced than what they're working on in class. In English, language arts, they're working on biography. So every kid has to read a biography, and they can do it during agenda time. But the biographies vary depending on whether you wanted to read about somebody in sports or somebody in medicine or somebody who's a politician or whatever, and also based on the kid's reading level. And then every student had a task to work on that related to one of the subjects, to math, to science. The 2 little boys she was talking to when I saw her in the room were working on a hypercard stack that had 2 parts. One part showed how the volcano erupted, and the other explained the steps in the eruption. And she had put that on there because these are 2 little guys who really are truly in love with technology, and for them it's a gateway to learning things that they don't care so much about. Sometimes she would put particular instructions. Might just be an instruction that they've been working on in science. Be sure to remember that scientists do these 3 things to verify their work, just to kind of remind them. And the kids would work on the agendas until she stopped agenda time, and then the rest of the day went on. And she said, it's working, Carol, because I can give every kid some of what they need first thing in the morning. And then if I can't do it the rest of the day, I don't feel so guilty. I know that I've gotten to them at least during that time. What do you think about that for a first-year teacher? I mean, what was so cool to me was that she thought of it. You know, she understood her own dilemma, and she hatched the response to that, which I thought was a pretty slick thing to be able to do. Look at this for just a second. Again, the goal is to reach out to individuals, not to sort of say I have 5 different tasks and I'm differentiating because everybody does all the same tasks but in a different order, but really trying a little bit more to get to the individual kid rather than just the movement in the class. Talk about this with a colleague or 2 for a minute, and if you're seated where you're not next to somebody, kind of pop yourself in and join a group to talk. Positives, negatives, what could she do better, what don't you understand? Chat about that just a minute.
I mean, did she do a learning inventory, interest inventory, learning style?
She said the volcano one was of their interest, so that one definitely would be.
And the hypercard was technology, and she knew those boys really liked technology. But there's not enough information to know if it decreased the time she was spending. She kept saying, well, I get here at 7, I leave here at 7, and I don't know.
I think it met the kids' needs. That was her main. I mean, I don't know whether it helped the time, but it definitely met her kids' needs.
Right.
I mean, for her that works.
But we still have a good.
You know, we'd have to come up with something.
Maybe by the time the kids unpack.
No, I agree. We'd have to. Obviously, it's probably for a little bit higher grades. We're K to 2, so now we have to how do we modify that to keep kids on task in first grade or second grade.
mean, this is really what the situation is in order to achieve something like that, I think.
Well, I suppose maybe you could do something like, if you're seeing kids for 45, maybe you could do like once a week, but your progress would be much slower because it would be once a week over many, many weeks.
Right.
And the other piece you'd have to think about is that front loading with the language issues too, like how, would there be some other way to do it, or would it just be saying, well, I have to do that, and then maybe shrink or compress the task somewhat because you knew you had to do that otherwise.
Language piece, yeah. The other thing that's sometimes is difficult is because it's only once a week. It's 7 days until they come back to me, right? So they'll look at the list and they need to dive back into this.
Positives for her, what do you think she's doing that is perhaps showing what we hope is going to happen with differentiation in regard to individual awareness? What are some of the things you see that you would say to her show good thought on her part, good direction?
Choice.
Yeah, kids love that. Now, it's not unrestricted choice that they have. It's not go do whatever you want. The assignment is appropriate for the kid. But then within that, they get a choice of where they're going to sit and which thing to do first, second, and third. And that amount of choice can be really engaging for a kid, really motivating for a student. So the choice is good. What else do you see that shows good thinking on her part?
I really like the special instructions that are linked to the tasks.
Like which one?
Just in general, the idea that she has some special instructions where she's anticipating here's where a kid might get stuck, and kind of giving that little prompt or that little extra help, and so it helps them to continue moving forward.
Yeah. This one to me, watch your punctuation and spelling, don't let them hurt your great skill at organizing ideas. That's particular to a kid. You can have a kid who's a really great thinker and writer, but they're sloppy as the dickens and they don't like the precision. And so she can use both group encouragement, direction, focus, and also comments to individuals that push an individual kid along. What else do you see?
It's very specific, and she even starred at the bottom. Remember that I might call you over, or don't forget to fill out your log. It's very specific, so she's not going to have to clarify anything.
Yeah.
But even if she does, with special instructions.
It's interesting, she taught the routine, and of course I'm sure it took her a few minutes to teach them what to do with the planning sheet and where to put it on the desk, and that she'd come look at it, what to do when they finish things. But once they've got that, that part just keeps rolling. And so she has given them great specificity, and you can work backwards, you can work forwards, you can give kids things based on their talents or their interests, like she did with the HyperCard kids. It can be things that push the class along, push the individual along. And I suspect starting the day off this way, where stuff is good for you and works well and the class is functioning smoothly and everybody's in place doing what they need to do, is a pretty good start to the day, better than that kind of staggering in as the kids come, with buses and mess and whatever happens. What else do you see that you think is kind of a plus?
Student accountability and progress monitoring. She can look and pull out their folder and see what they have done, know where they're at, be able to conference with them. Plus all the students are accountable now, instead of just putting something up on the board one direction, knowing who got what done and what didn't get done.
And one of the things that you're saying there, I want to point out to you because of a comment somebody made in here yesterday. This is not a teacher who's a first-year teacher who's 10 times wiser than any of us were. She sat and worked with much more veteran teachers on a topic where they were ahead of her. And so a lot of these little ideas, like the daily planning log and that tight degree of accountability, she saw somebody else do. It's that sense that somebody raised yesterday, if you work in partnerships with people, you pick up ideas they have, and you can go so much further than you can on your own ideas. And I agree with you, she's doing a really nice job with structure, accountability, both on the kids' part and on her part for monitoring where it is. Okay, so this is another teacher who's sort of reaching out, trying to work with kids who have individual needs. And in my way of thinking, although she's not walking on water, she exemplifies what good differentiation is better than just the center where there's movement, but that's about all you can say for it. And by the way, this has real application, I think, at any grade level. You think about this in an elementary school where the kids come in and stay in the same room all day. But this would be a great thing to do in a middle or high school class where you say to the students, here's an agenda that I want you to work on anytime you finish your work early in class for the next month or the next marking period. And also, I may from time to time assign you something on your agenda for homework. I may just say, spend 30 minutes on your agenda at home tonight. What that allows you to do is to create an agenda for students with low science vocabulary, where they're practicing the vocabulary more and getting some stuff that they need to prepare them for upcoming science. Would be useful for students with learning disabilities, kids that are learning English, students that come from backgrounds that don't have a great deal of vocabulary. This is a place where you can give kids work from last year and the year before that they didn't quite understand that they really need in order to move forward. It's a place you can give kids things that are real extensions or applications of what you're working on. And if you create them, and by the way, she did not create 28 of these that are totally different from each other. Everybody has a spelling thing. Everybody has something about this. Everybody has some math. Everybody's reading their biography. So a great deal of the core of it, or at least the shell of it, is the same. What the specifics are may differ a little. If you created 3 or 4 agendas like this, or maybe 6 pieces, and you match them, which is easy on the computer with cut and paste, and you had those for your students, they'd have something to work on anytime they finished early in your class. They'd have something to work on if you needed to have students just work for a few minutes so you could check homework or meet with a small group of kids. And a great thing sometimes for homework at night is to be able to say to students, your name is on the overhead and there's a letter by it. Find your name and the letter beside it real quickly. And when I did that, I made sure it was quick. I'd put it up and take it down pretty fast. So the kid doesn't have time to go shopping to see what letter is by his 6 best friends' names. You just look at yours and you've got it. My name has a Q beside it. And when the teacher takes that down, then she says, if you had homework assignment Q, here's what you need to do. If you had homework assignment V, here's what you need to do. If you had homework assignment S, here's what you need to do. And it could be that some students are doing, again, more applied kinds of things. Some may be trying to analyze and pull something apart. And some of the kids may not need that homework at all. And assignment Q might be spend 45 minutes on your agenda, which means that the teacher doesn't have to devise the homework for them. There's already something to do. So this kind of an agenda is pretty flexible. Here's another scenario, and I'm going to do this one quickly because when I was talking to you about the open-endedness a few minutes ago, I'm sure you do this in class sometime. I'm standing here thinking, why the heck is that slide there? That doesn't really go with what we just looked at. Although, of course, being a teacher, I told you what it was anyway, but I have 2 of them reversed, and so we've really actually talked about this already. Mr. Narvez likes open-ended tasks as the key means of differentiation in his room. When he uses open-ended assignments, he says they're a fit for everybody in his classes. Every kid just takes the assignment as far as he or she's capable of taking it. And I hear that really often. Do open-endedness and everybody goes as far as they can go. For example, this week he asked students to develop a logical and supported argument for or against the statement that a goal of science is to improve the quality of life for people. Once students have completed the assignment, he will have them share their thinking in groups as part of their science unit that includes information on genetic engineering. So his deal is it correct that a major goal of science is to improve the quality of life, or does science not really aspire to that? Does it just simply aspire to learn the next thing? And the kids have to argue that, again, with instructions. And his thing is, kids who really know a lot about this will take it far, and kids who don't will kind of give us the bottom line, and everybody feels good because they're successful. But the point is that if it's unsupported open-endedness, what I have just determined is what you knew how to do without my pushing you anywhere. For you to learn, I now have to push you to the next step in using resources, in thinking, in writing. And the slide that was missing just a few minutes ago, just in case you're interested with the centers, the one that was supposed to be there was just because there's action and movement in a classroom doesn't mean the work's differentiated. That's the one that was supposed to be with the centers that was reversed. Okay, one more here. let's see finally what you think about this teacher who, again, is trying to work toward better and better skills at looking at individual needs rather than throwing out something for the whole class. Homework assignment for next Monday. Your goal is to develop a supported argument for or against capital punishment. To help you prepare, you'll have a variety of books, articles, and websites you can consult. Many workshops which the teacher will conduct on using resources to build your case, building a logical argument, presenting your argument. An opportunity for peer review of your work, our class rubric to guide the quality of your work. You may present your argument in the form of an essay, an annotated outline, a series of storyboards, a PowerPoint presentation. And she's asking the kids to use a product card for whichever of these things they choose. A product card is really handy. If you ask kids to do an annotated outline, it would be really helpful if they knew what a good one looked like. If you ask them to do a political cartoon, it ought not to be their version of a political cartoon, but what a political cartoonist would do. And so a product card is just a little cardboard thing, usually laminated so it will have a long lifespan, that says a good political cartoon has these elements that look these ways. So that when somebody tries to do the political cartoon, they understand, okay, it has to have a caption that does this, it needs white space that serves this, it uses these kinds of pictures that accomplish this thing, and when you have a few product cards and build on those, you can give kids choices more easily than you can when you think you're telling them to choose something, but then they have no clue how to do a credible job of what they chose. So this is a homework assignment where a student is working at the secondary level to build and support a case. The teacher's trying hard to reach out to individuals to kind of stretch them from their points to work with them in ways that are appropriate for them. Talk with a colleague one more time. What would you say is useful in this teacher's attempts to reach out to kids? What would you suggest that she still needs to work on a bit? Talk about that for just a minute.
The product card too is very good.
Setting them up for success by explaining. But I wonder if like a rubric, something in writing goes with that.
Well, she said our class rubric to guide you the quality of your work.
Oh, there we go. Okay.
Yeah, she does.
They know what excellence in that product genre looks like.
Because the excellence in a rubric that can work for all of these products has to be fairly generic, and therefore I love that too. I think that's an excellent tool. That's going in my toolbox now.
Okay, if you can hear me, clap twice. What do you see this teacher doing that either replicates some of the better things we've seen in earlier examples, or avoids some of the mistakes we've seen in earlier examples, or extends beyond things we've seen in earlier examples? What would you say, what are you thinking about this teacher's capacity to reach out to individuals? I'm a very patient person. Yes?
Well, she's giving them some structure on, it's an open-ended task, very much so, but there's points along the way where she's offering them as little or as much help as they feel they would need access to.
That's a very good point she's making. Open-endedness is not a bad thing. So when you give kids open-ended choices, they have freedom to think, to be creative, to go in ways they want to really be thinkers. What's good here is there's open-endedness with structure. And so it's not just every man for himself, go do whatever comes to you. But if you're having difficulty knowing how to use these resources, I'll do a mini workshop on that, and there's help for you. Then you can use them in the way you want to, but I'll at least show you how if you're stuck. Not going to teach it to the whole class, we're assuming here, because they've had a chance to hear that before, but just because you've been exposed to it before doesn't mean you got it. You know, lots of us need help lots of times with things. So there are opportunities for structure that you need without taking away the open-ended. This is a good point. What else do you see? Yes?
That they have the class rubric to guide them
in the quality of their work, what she's looking for.
Yeah, and rubrics to guide kids can be used in a number of ways. I worked with a group of folks in Chapel Hill, North Carolina, that did some stuff that I really liked. They developed rubrics, and they did several things that are a little unusual when they developed them, which, by the way, they did as grade level teams. The whole 7th grade science crew would get together and develop one that could be used across science classes. Sometimes the whole middle school would get together and do one that went across science at all grades so that the kids would continue to see that growth. Very thoughtful work. Once they got them done, they did a couple of other things that I thought were helpful. Typically, we see a rubric that starts with the lowest possible level of achievement and moves up. They always put the highest level on the left, so it was the first thing that you saw when you looked at it. Second thing they did was they never put a column on that was not adequate and appropriate. A lot of times we'll put a column on that says unsatisfactory, and their deal was, why talk to the kids about what unsatisfactory looks like? Our job is to lift them to satisfactory. They need to see that and understand it. Third thing they did that I thought was good was they didn't put numbers or labels. They didn't put labels on the top of the columns. So they didn't say expert and practitioner and novice and that kind of thing. They just put 1, 2, 3, 4. Or ABC, not grades, you wouldn't want to do that. And then they would take the kids and give them the rubric, and they'd talk with them about it, and they'd ask the student to circle the thing that they thought they needed to work on next. So a student then would look at the first element and look across the columns and say, I think I need to work on this. And they might circle something in the second column and something in the third column, because we don't all fall into columns neatly. There's some place where we're a little better and some place where we need to go back. So the students would actually circle on the rubric the attribute that they were working on that time. And to me, that became a very personalized rubric. In other words, it wasn't everybody should be here right now, and if you were a really good person, you'd be there. But what's your next step and where is it? And in that particular instance, I thought the rubric was particularly helpful to the students, because they could sort of say, here's where I was last time. And it's not about column 2, it's about which thing were you doing and what's the thing you need to do next. And they marked those, and that provided particularly good support. Other thoughts or things here that you think show maybe an extension of what we've seen or falling into the same pitfalls? Yes?
My question is, where's the teacher's input on the student's ability level? The student's always making the choice there at which level they're working at, which presentation they're giving. Where's the teacher input on that? Because students aren't always great at picking what level they're at.
Yeah, and that's
whether
a great...
they need those extra help stations or not.
Yeah, that's a great point, and one that I think we really have to consider with good differentiation. Choices are great, but even with high school students, as parents, we don't say hang out with who you want and eat what you want and come in when you want and you'll do fine. We have parameters if we want the world to keep circulating. And at the same time, if we're smart, while we're putting the fences in, we're trying to teach the kids to make wiser choices so that they become more and more thoughtful and independent. And I think you always have to choose on those two things. When is this a time when it's good to let a kid make a choice, maybe with your coaching on the side, and when is it time for you to step in and say, I'd like you to do this? So let me give you some, for instances here. Let's go to one of the things he asked. I'm going to conduct these mini workshops, and I don't want the whole class to have to sit there and listen to these things, because some of the kids are perfectly fine with them. So I'm going to say, while you guys are working on your science chapter right now, I'm going to be doing a mini workshop on using resources for 10 minutes over here. If you'd like to come to that mini workshop, come on over and we'll talk about how to use resources. Well, with any luck, 6 or 7 kids that need that workshop will come. And with any luck, 3 kids who need it won't come because they either didn't hear the assignment or don't want to stand up or don't know they need the help. So I think it's really good in a situation like that for a teacher to issue invitations and to say to the class, I'm going to use an open invitation, but sometimes I may notice, or at least I may be uncomfortable, that I'm not sure you're quite as good with something as you might be, so I'm going to ask you to come to the workshop. It won't take very long, and if it turns out you didn't need it, please tell me when it's over so that I'll understand, that I misunderstood where you were. But I want to make sure you've got this, so anybody who'd like to come can come, and then as everybody's coming up to the corner, I'm also going to walk around and issue some invitations, or if that seems awkward, then issue the invitation before you ever announce the mini workshop. I can say to kids when they come in the room, Josh, I'm going to do a mini workshop on using resources today. I'd really like for you to come because, and you've already issued the invitation before you ever even mentioned to the whole class that there was a workshop. I think there are ways to intervene like that. I think here I'm going to assume that the teacher has a variety of books, articles, and websites at different readability levels. I'm going to assume that teacher has talked with kids about choosing something that works well for you. What does it feel like when you're trying to read something that you have no clue about? And what benefit is it to you if you choose something that you knew all the stuff in before you ever started? And really try to help the kids make those choices. But if I'm finding a kid who always chooses stuff that's too easy because she wants to be sure she got the A, then I'm just going to kind of say, Heather, when you work with your assignment over the weekend, I'd like for you to use at least this website, which has university level material on it, and at least these 2 books, which I know push you further than you are. You may use whatever other resources you want to use. And I think there are ways to intervene like that so that we balance the choice and the freedom. Many kids will make the right choices, and we don't need to take those away from them because a few don't. But neither do we need to let the few keep roaming in the wrong way. And for me, more of an issue than making sure Heather uses the right book this time is to keep working with Heather so that she's more willing to accept a challenge, because that's what the issue really is for her. It's not so much that she doesn't want to use this book this time, it's that she wants to play it safe all the time. And I want to try to keep her from playing it safe, but I also want to help her understand that need if I can. But I think that's a great point. We don't give kids free license with everything, and certainly shouldn't with academics either. I think one of our major jobs as teachers is to be diagnosers and prescribers. And I honestly believe that one of the boo-boos we make is that we become prescribers without being diagnosers. We just create the prescription and slap it on the whole class. And honestly, what differentiation's saying is, let's try the whole job. Let's try being clear about the goals, diagnosing where kids are, and then prescribing what they need, rather than coming in with one prescription for everybody. And so if you're diagnosing, you're going to find different needs.
Using differentiated strategies to diagnose readiness is one way that teachers can create lessons that are responsive to students' individual needs. In the next video, Dr. Tomlinson will expand on the topic of curriculum and differentiation as she explains how student engagement plus student understanding will equal academic success.